So collective mindfulness is a concept that has emerged in the last roughly 20-ish years of research in organizational dynamics. And I found as I researched it and read about it that it actually fits SRE quite well. So I want to start today, though, by talking to you about the opposite, mindlessness. Let's start by clearing your minds. Let's start by thinking about what is mindlessness. It's going through things automatically. It's when you're driving home and you get in the car and all of a sudden you're home and you don't realize how you got there. It's typing the same commands, looking at the same dashboards day after day just because it's automatic. It's instinct. It's responding without really thinking. How many of you can identify with any of this? Okay, a few. Good. It's very common. How about the scenario where it's 3 o'clock in the morning and maybe you're only half awake because your pager or your phone, something went off and something is going wrong and you have to figure out how to respond. Can anyone identify with that? Okay, fewer people. That's surprising, but that's okay, because all of these things lead to stress. There was a great lightning talk by Dawn Parchik, I'm probably butchering her name, and Jamie Wu at SREcon Americas, where they recap some of the findings from the 2019 Catchpoint survey of SREs. Interestingly, in that survey, they asked people how well they coped with stress. And a lot of people said, oh, well, I don't really feel stressed. Then they had some other questions where they asked if you manifest particular symptoms. They didn't say these are symptoms of stress, but they said, do you ever have problems going back to sleep? Do you ever have problems disconnecting from work? I'll leave the details for you to read in the Catchpoint survey, which is linked from the slides that are already posted to the program site. But needless to say, lots of people said, oh, no, I don't have any problems with stress. And yet at the same time, they said, yes, I have these symptoms. So there's an identification mismatch going on here. Ultimately, we work in distributed complex environments that have these characteristics. They're volatile, they're uncertain. What we do to the system, we're not quite sure how the system's going to respond because somebody changed it yesterday, right? They're chaotic, they're ambiguous. And these are characteristics across industries such as firefighting, healthcare, especially emergency rooms and operating theaters that have come to be known as VUCA, hence the letters in the front. And I think SRE actually qualifies as well. Let's look at the antidote to dealing with this kind of scenario, and that is being mindful. Mindful is seeing more clearly. It is a character of attention. It's not just looking at things harder. It is a different way of looking at things. On an individual level, and you don't need to read the whole slide, it is being present, being aware of what is happening both inside and outside, inside your systems as well as the context in which your systems are operating, understanding what's happening within your team, how your team is operating, and how it is interfacing with other teams in an accepting, open, non-judgmental way. Fits very much with the blameless theme that we heard about yesterday in the opening sections. So that's an individual level. What's it look like for a group? For a group, it allows a team to discern details. Critically, they can discern the important details, and they can act swiftly in response. So they've studied this, and teams that manifest these capabilities are able to create better reliability. They're able to generate greater customer satisfaction. They're better able to allocate resources to cope with challenges. And they have improved quality, safety, and reliability. All good things. That's my thesis, that this makes better decision making. And this effect becomes more pronounced under conditions of high stress. Low stress, everybody does pretty well. High stress, teams that have collective mindfulness excel. So there are 5 key distinguishing characteristics for organizations or groups that are manifesting collective mindfulness. And I think you'll find that many SREs and SRE organizations fit these pretty well. So if I was to ask you, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of things that SREs are concerned about? Anybody care to volunteer? On-call, availability, close. Availability, sort of. Number 1 for collective mindfulness is a preoccupation with failure. By thinking ahead about failures, you're able to be prepared for them. You can discover them in the early phases. It increases alertness of the team. It fights inertia. It allows you to look for alternatives rather than being frozen deer in headlights. You're already prepared and ready to deal with the situation. And you can develop processes to prevent mistakes. Second characteristic of collective mindfulness is a reluctance to simplify explanations. Rather than lumping everything into, oh, the system failed, teams that go into the detail and understand from the data why this manifestation of a problem is different from that manifestation of a problem are operating in the collective mindful sense. So it discourages adopting a blind cookie cutter or cargo cult approach. It's like, oh yeah, last week they just restarted the system. Did you unplug it and plug it back in? You know? In this case, you look at the unique context and you can come up with better quality responses. Number 3, a sensitivity to operations. What is really happening, not theoretically, but what is really happening in your scenario? You share real-time data. You shift problems to the people who know what's really going on and engage them effectively. And you communicate. One of the interesting aspects of effective organizations in collective mindfulness is that they typically have 3 tempos of operation. They'll have normal, everyday. They've got kind of a mid-range, up-tempo, heightened awareness, if you like. And then there's crisis, and they adapt their reactions accordingly so that they can perform effectively across all the range of situations. Characteristic number 4 is a commitment to resilience. This encourages individuals to use their initiative to bring process improvement in the long term. It encourages activities to prevent failures, and it relies, again, on expertise from people at the front line who understand the way the systems work and how they respond. And it allows teams to respond in the instant, rather than having to escalate to some expert, some so-called expert, or somebody with a big title to decide what to do. The teams on the front line are empowered to take the action and fix the problem immediately. And the last, 5th characteristic for collective mindfulness is recognizing the experiential expertise. It's the people on the front line, at the tip of the spear, the people who are running the systems, who understand best about them. Not the architect who designed it in theory and doesn't know how it was actually built. Not necessarily even the developers who lack the systemic understanding, but in our cases, it's the SREs that understand this. And this is sometimes, if you read the literature, you'll find this experiential expertise aspect is called underspecification of structures. This comes from studies in the military space, where having an excessive reliance on rank and title can sometimes delay an effective response to, for instance, an attack. So here are the 5 characteristics. They go by the acronym FSOAR: preoccupation with failure, resisting simplification of explanations, a focus on operations, a commitment to resilience, and respecting experiential expertise. We've heard over the last years of SREcon and from the writing in the community on blogs and on Twitter about a few different concepts that intersect with this, but they're actually a little bit distinct from what has been come to known as collective mindfulness. The first of these overlaps is psychological safety. So for more reading on this, here's some of the characteristics of it. I'll refer you either to the write-up of Google's Project Aristotle or Chapter 27 in Seeking SRE that John Looney, who ran yesterday's distributed systems course, wrote. Both of these talk quite a bit about the psychological safety aspects. Again, I have links in the slide deck that you can find already posted on the program site. Other important components that intersect with or overlap against collective mindfulness is the capability and the skill at anticipating problems. So studies of what is expertise have found that expertise involves knowing where to look more so than just a quantity of looking. So chess masters look at patterns on the board. They don't analyze the positions of each individual figure. Expert drivers, whether they be race car or whether they just be, let's say, defensive drivers, know what to look for rather than looking at every little thing on the road, which is what a new driver is preoccupied with. The new driver is preoccupied with minutia and noise. The experienced driver can throw away the noise and focus on the key threats as they're driving along the road. Likewise, for effective teams working with collective mindfulness, they manifest this expertise because they know where to look and they're attuned to their systems. So the three characteristics that fit with this is, of course, the focus on failure and the refusal to simplify explanations and being attuned to operations. The other part of it, that's anticipating failures when failures do occur, because undoubtedly they do. Containing problems is the other part of an effective team, and this is where resilience and practical expertise and deference to the frontline expertise comes in. Let's talk a little bit more about the resilient teams side of it. Because resilience for an individual is one thing, resilient for a team is another thing. I will refer you, because I've read some of her other writing. Laura Hogan has just published a brand new book called Resilient Management. I haven't had a chance to read it yet because it came out like yesterday and I've been busy here at the conference. But if you're interested, I put a link in here for it, and I'm sure that it's excellent. I plan to read it on my way home. But what is a resilient team? Resilient teams manifest a skill at improvisation. So they're able to look at a situation, study it quickly, develop trust within themselves and assessment of the situation. They engage in just-in-time learning. They are able to simulate what will happen if I do X and have that conversation, sometimes in a very abbreviated fashion because they've worked together closely. And then they can bring fragmentary concepts together to make an effective plan. That's improvisation. Not only are they good on thinking at their feet, but they work with an attitude of humility or wisdom. The literature calls it both. I'm not sure they're quite the same thing, but essentially they realize they don't understand everything and they're willing to learn. So reliable performance increases when a close call or a close mistake gets interpreted as danger masquerading as safety. Rather than saying, oh, good, we missed that one, and so therefore it looked dangerous, but it wasn't really danger, we're safe. You have to look at it from the preoccupation with failure as what if something had gone slightly wrong and our site had completely fallen over. And that leads to resiliency. Both of these, improvisation and operating with an attitude of humility, rely on effective and respectful interactions. People are able to communicate. They trust what their coworkers tell them, And in turn, what they tell their coworkers can be trusted and is trusted. So they can cut a lot of the static out of, do I really believe what this person told me? They just take it and move forward. Now, under conditions of extreme stress, people can get a little terse. Sometimes they get maybe not very nice. Things can degrade under situations of stress. This is where practice can come in handy, and having a standardized ritual of communication can help to clarify things. This stick model of communication is adapted both from the military and from some medical scenarios, where you talk about, here's the situation as I see it. Here is what I think we should do. That's the task. Here is why, and this is the intent. And then you say, what are you concerned about? If we do this, it could be that it's going to knock over the load balancer in another region. And then you have a calibration. You ask for feedback. What do you think? Sometimes adopting these very ritualized forms of communication can help to diffuse a situation of high stress. And because everybody is on the same page, they know what parts come next, they can follow along easier. Think about other rituals that you may have in your organizations. Maybe a common postmortem template, a way that you talk through incidents afterwards. Maybe you're looking proactively and you do a SWOT, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis. These are all rituals that help us to cover the bases. This morning, Laura talked about a recipe for quality design. She's got 10 items, I believe, she was proposing that you think through as you're evaluating a design. These are all rituals. They can help you to cover the bases, and it can help people to be on a common parlance. But you have to practice these things. And you have to practice them before the world is burning down around your ears. So I don't expect anybody to read this except on the slides afterwards, but I included it here because this is a 9-item psychometrically validated survey that helps you to evaluate for your organization, let's say your SRE organization, your team, as well as for larger organizations to evaluate how effectively you operate in the realm of collective mindfulness. So you score, the scoring information is at the bottom. Again, I realize the type is very small, but I put it here as a resource for you when you look at the slides afterwards. There's also a citation for the origin of this survey. So let's look again at the FSOR model of collective mindfulness. We're looking at a preoccupation with failure, resisting simplifications, being aware of operations, looking for resilience and doing things to facilitate resilience in the teams, and deferring to expertise that actually knows what's going on the ground. So how can you foster these practices and develop collective mindfulness in your organization? Number one is that there's steps that leaders can take. Leaders can improve the environment by ongoing education, training, practices. Active leaders with self-confidence are able to delegate more effectively. So if you've got an insecure leader, have them work on that. They use clear purpose, they use clear language and procedures. And they are trusted by their people, as well as supporting their people. So these are all characteristics in general, I think, of good leadership, but they also foster teams to operate with collective mindfulness. And then there are organizational practices over and beyond what the leaders do that can help. Actively socializing. Vivid stories is kind of the nice term for what we would call war stories of what went wrong and how did we deal with it. Continuous training, simulations both of rare events, wheel of misfortune, or practicing communication patterns. and empowerment, delegating the authority to the frontline people who know what's really going on. Now, I'll note here that IT systems, whether they're something you buy from a vendor or you build inside your own organization, can either improve or hinder operating mindfully. If they help you to have better awareness of the risks that you're facing, if they help you to analyze the issues that are going on and increase collaboration, then they're a net positive contributor to collective mindfulness. On the other hand, if your systems make work routine, completely automated, and inflexible, then they're going to degrade your ability to operate with collective mindfulness. There's various studies in aviation that have shown that the proper design of cockpit systems and cockpit communication patterns can either enhance the ability of a crew to respond to emergencies effectively or cause them to turn into disasters and lose airplanes. So I'll leave you with this note. Collective mindfulness is not a static creation in your organization. It is something that you need to continually develop and continually cultivate. There has been a hypothesis that has been basically discredited, that it was, oh yeah, we get there and then good, we have a grade A, we're #1, we'll always be there. And studies have shown that that is not the case. You can get a team operating effectively in collective mindfulness and then lose that skill if you don't continue to keep things active. So that's it. Any questions? Once again, I'll mention that slides have already been posted to the program site, so you're welcome to grab them there. There are links and other resources as part of the slide deck.
Hi. In one of the slides, you had mentioned that to improve mindfulness, we should not be looking at automation. But to scale, we need automation, right? I'm not able to fit in how mindfulness and automation can gel together.
If automation takes away an ability to respond from the team, that is where it works negatively. If it allows the team to multiply their impact, then it's good. But if it constrains them so that they can't do something they need to do to respond. So think about, for example, an automated deployment system that does not allow you to terminate deployments that are going wrong. That would be an example of automation that's bad.
Sure.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.